Welcome to According to Sam, folks. Happy summer solstice. Summer has officially kicked off, and hope you guys have had a great week. I have a really good podcast for you guys today. This is episode 222, and I have a lot to cover. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get to it all, but without wasting any more time, let's get right into today's podcast. I want to start today's podcast with this CNN clip that went viral about democracy, asking the question, well, not asking the question, it's actually propaganda. And CNN is, again, gaslighting, because just like we talked about in the last podcast with this term cheap fake, that they just invented. If anyone is guilty of cheap fakes, it's our media. And there's tons of examples. I gave a few in the last podcast, but they're gaslighting. And this is another example of them gaslighting. And I want you to take a look at this clip.
President Biden touts his re-election campaign as a fight to preserve democracy. But if you ask some Trump supporters, the former president is not a threat to democracy because the United States is not a democracy. CNN's Donnie O'Sullivan spoke to some of those supporters.
What happens if Trump loses?
I don't see him losing.
I don't think he lost the last election, to be honest.
Do you think he's going to win?
Yes. Without a doubt. No doubt.
What if he doesn't this time? What happens to the country?
We're in trouble. We're in big trouble. We're done. If Biden talks about democracy, saving democracy, they're the ones that are killing democracy.
Obviously, there's a lot of criticisms of Trump that he is bad for democracy, that he's bad for American democracy.
Okay, we are a republic.
We're a republic.
We are not a democracy.
We're a representative republic. We're not a democracy.
One thing we've been hearing at Trump rallies like this over the past few months is that America isn't really a democracy.
America's not a democracy, it's a republic.
It's not a democracy. Okay, democracy is actually not as good as you think it is.
But for centuries, America has celebrated its democracy.
Democracy is worth dying for.
Democracy remains the definition.
So this I think that this is the most deceptive thing about this little chubby leprechaun's segment here is that he plays the clips of Ronald Reagan, Republican, and George Bush saying that the United States is a democracy. So it's basically saying that all of these Republicans, Ronald Reagan and George Bush, said that we were a democracy, and now the Republicans under Trump are saying that we're not a democracy. No, we've never been a direct democracy. They know exactly what they're doing, and again, they're gaslighting you.
Democracy is worth dying for.
Democracy remains the definition of political legitimacy.
So, they're completely gaslighting you, because it is true that the United States is a democracy. It's a democratic republic. It's a constitutional republic, but we are a democratic republic. A concept that is in the Declaration of Independence that I want to bring to your attention, that shows that we are a democratic republic, that we are a democracy, but we're not a direct democracy. And it's this second paragraph in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their powers from the consent of the governed. That concept of the consent of the governed, that even though we elect people to govern, they govern at our consent. That we elect people to represent us. So we are a form of democracy, but we are a republic. This concept of consent of the governed is a Wikipedia page, and it says the philosophy and the phrase consent of the governed refers to the idea that government's legitimacy and moral right to use state power is justified and lawful only when consent by the people or society over which the political power is exercised. The theory of consent is a snarky contrast with the divine right of kings and has often been invoked against the legitimacy of colonialism. So, all these people that are anti-colonialism, you just do not understand how anti-colonial the United States is. The consent of the governed is the concept, because we in the Revolutionary War, they fought to put off the chains of monarchy. And these are all Greek words. The word archy means rule by. Monarchy means ruled by one. Tetrarchy means ruled by four. Democracy means ruled by the people. Oligarchy means ruled by few, which is what we actually really live in. And I'm going to show you that here in a moment, that we live in an oligarchy. So the consent of the governed, all of these concepts come from people like here, John Locke, David Hume. These are the concepts that the people who created the United States of America took to Philadelphia when, over a decade later, after the Declaration of Independence, they went to Philadelphia to create the United States of America. And the people of this country, the reason that the people of this country can buy into this democracy stuff and talk about direct democracy and think that we're a direct democracy, because they're ignorant. People have no idea about the way our system works, the way the system was founded. When the Commonwealths after the Revolutionary War sent delegates to Philadelphia for the Philadelphia Convention, first of all, Commonwealths like Rhode Island, they refused to even send delegates because they were so suspicious of a new government. Every delegate that went from every single Commonwealth was suspicious about a new government and a new government having power. That's why they created a bicameral legislature. And you have to understand the compromises that took place, that had to take place, or there would be no United States of America. The Sherman Plan, the bicameral legislature, the Electoral College. There would be no United States without the Electoral College. These are all compromises that had to be made in Philadelphia to create the government and the republic that we have. They did not want a direct democracy. States like the smaller states like Connecticut, Rhode Island, what are some of the other smaller commonwealths? I mean, why would they create a government that gave Virginia and New York all the power? No, they wanted to separate power. So that's why they created a constitution with separation of powers. We're not a direct democracy. We're a democratic republic because we elect representatives to represent us and to govern by our consent. It's very important. So to that end, you have to understand this book, The Engineering of Consent. So the engineering of consent, and this is why I say that we're not a democracy, we're actually an oligarchy, because the nobility, they went from the divine right to rule. So the nobility went from the divine right to rule, that now they rule by manufacturing or engineering consent, that those who govern by our consent. But Edward Bernays tells the elite how to engineer our consent. And that's what people need to understand, is that your consent is being engineered on a daily basis, and you don't even know how your consent is being engineered. Edward Bernays also wrote this book, Propaganda. He created the word propaganda. Joseph Goebbels and the Nazis, They learned propaganda from Edward Bernays. We didn't learn propaganda from them. They learned from Edward Bernays. But Edward Bernays, his family was Austrian, German. Again, Edward Bernays' uncle is Sigmund Freud. He took Sigmund Freud's ideas and about the id, ego, and superego, and he learned how to sell politicians or politics by appealing to base instincts, to people's ids. That's why all politics is about emotions now, and the media is always appealing to your emotions. They don't want you to think rational about issues. They want you to think emotionally about it. It all comes from engineering consent and Edward Bernays and propaganda. So we are a democratic republic, and those who rule by our consent, by the consent of the governed. But the nobility has now taken power because they are, through the media and through very crafty psychological tactics that they have perfected, are engineering our consent. And that's how they govern. That's how the oligarchy governs, by engineering our consent. That those who govern do govern by our consent, but our consent is being engineered, or as Noam Chomsky said, manufacturing. I want you to look at this clip. This is Edward Bernays. Edward Bernays lived a long time, I think into his late 90s. And this was an appearance that he did on the David Letterman show, I think in the 90s. Take a look.
Hi, Doctor. Good to see you. Come on up over here. There you go. Doctor, tell me again what the doctor is. What are we dealing with here? You're the father of public relations.
What we're dealing with really is the concept that people will believe me more if you call me doctor.
Oh, I see.
That's what it's about. It's about making people believe. That's what this guy did. That's what was Bernays' magic. And you think about that think about what we just went through with COVID-19 and Dr. Fauci, that people will believe me more if you call me doctor. It all came from Bernays, and our consent is being engineered and manufactured on a daily basis. So you really have to be a sophisticated person to get beyond this stuff. I want you to take a look at this clip, and then we're going to get started with today's podcast.
According to Hall, one of the chief secrets of Masonry, handed down through the centuries, was the concept of democracy, which was said to be a threat to the kings and monarchs of the ancient world, who ruled by divine right.
Yes, it had to be secret because the idea of democracy was worse than heresy. It was treason.
Nevertheless, these societies were determined to bring forth their great plan, no matter what the cost. In his book, The Secret Destiny of America, Manly P. Hall wrote that world democracy was the secret dream of the great classical philosophers, saying that the brilliant plan of the ancients has survived to our time, and it will continue to function until the great work is accomplished. Many researchers believe this great work is the secret behind the wars and rumors of war America has been involved in through the 20th century, right up to the present day. Could this plan of the ancients to establish a world democracy be the real hidden agenda of secret societies? And was this ancient plan echoed in the 2005 inaugural address given by President Bush?
When our founders declared a new order of the ages, they were acting on an ancient hope that is meant to be fulfilled.
The occult is working at the highest levels of our society, using the military and financial power of the United States to bring about this one world state. And the president has spoken openly about it, how the purpose of the United States is to bring democracy to the nations of the world. Where did this become the function of our nation, to bring democracy to the world? You only need to read the writings of Manly P. Hall, where he tells you that for 3,000 years, secret societies have been working to bring democracy to the world.
So they want a democracy, but they don't want a democracy like the democracy that we have now, which is a constitutional republic with the separation of powers. These people that are pushing this propaganda, like the chubby leprechaun here from CNN, these people, they are advocating for getting rid of I've heard them. I don't have time to show you this in this podcast, but check the show notes. Go to my website. I'll put articles in there where these people are advocating for getting rid of the Electoral College, for California having more senators than Montana, because California has more citizens. That these people want direct democracy, and they're advocating for direct democracy. And so that is not the American democracy that we have. We do not have a direct democracy. We have a constitutional republic, a democratic representative republic, but it is not direct democracy. And as the clip that I just showed you says, that the vision is a global democracy where they can give people the idea that they're free because they're the ones that are electing people who are ruling over them. But you're not free, because even in a global democracy like that, your consent can be engineered, that you can be controlled by the propaganda that is fed you. So that's what's going on in this country. All right, so let's get into today's podcast. Pick up a little bit with where I left off in the last podcast. I played this clip in the last podcast because the debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden is this next week. It's going to be on Wednesday. And I played this clip from this woman from this week saying that the rules and the way that everything was set up in this debate was set up to be a policy debate. And she believes that a policy debate would benefit Joe Biden. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. But let's listen to this clip again, and then we're going to talk a little bit about, why I believe Joe Biden doesn't want to have a policy debate. Take a listen.
It's really hard for me to see how this is beneficial to Donald Trump. There's no audience. He plays off the energy of the crowd. And, by cutting his mic off, like talking over people, he's not going to be able to sort of distract from the policy debate. Somebody once told me when, we were first talking about this CNN debate and what the rules might look like, that the hardest possible debate you can have is actually what we're going to see here. And that is no audience, very strict time restraints and not being able to interrupt people. And that means the focus is going to be very much on policy, which honestly is not Donald Trump's strength. So I don't know. I think this does give Biden an advantage.
So policy is not Donald Trump's strength, is what she says. Which policy is Joe Biden? Joe Biden's got a 37% approval rating. Which policy is Joe Biden's strength? Border policy? Immigration policy? Foreign policy? Which foreign policy is his strength? Which domestic policy is Joe Biden's strength? Is Joe Biden just itching to have a policy debate on? None of it. There's not a single policy that Joe Biden is strong on. Not one. So you're telling me that he wants to have a policy debate? It's absolutely ridiculous. And now that I've thought about this a little bit more, and we'll talk about this further along in the podcast, but the moderators are going to play a very important role. They're like the referees. And if anybody who watches football, especially the NFL, knows how much power the referees have. They can stop a drive with one flag, one holding flag. Just minor little things that the referee can do to steer the game in a direction. You know how that goes if you watch football. But that's the same type of power that these moderators are going to have. And let's see if they steer the debate into a policy debate or if they steer it into another direction, because Joe Biden does not want to have a debate on policy. Nothing that Joe Biden is doing is a policy debate. Joe Biden wants to have a debate on character. And ironically, I mean, if you know Joe Biden, he's got terrible character. What are you talking about? I mean, you want to have a debate on character? Remember in 2020, he was running on restoring the soul of the nation. Where's the soul of the nation right now, 3 years later? But that's the debate he wants to have. He wants to have a debate on political violence and January 6th and Trump's a dictator and that he's a racist and that he is a convicted felon and all of that. None of that is going to improve your life. None of that is going to help you live a better life. But again, that is manufacturing consent. That is playing on your emotions. That's the debate that Joe Biden wants to have. Not a policy debate. But the problem is that debate, the debate that Joe Biden wants to have and on character and January 6th and violence and all that stuff, that's not a winning debate. That's not a winning debate at all. I want you to take a look at this clip. Hold on. I thought I had it prepped. Here we go.
Quote, "This is scary." That's how one Democratic strategist close to the Biden campaign is describing the president's current platform, which rests on playing up voters' concerns about January 6th and political violence and democracy. And according to Axios reporter Alex Thompson's new reporting, some influential top Democrats warn that this is a losing strategy. I want to bring in two correspondents who cover national politics, including Alex Thompson of Axios, as well as CNN's Eva McCann. So explain this. I mean, as they say, the call's coming from inside the House. Who in Biden world is driving the strategy and who's dissenting?
So the main people that are driving this strategy are the president himself. You've seen whenever he gives democracy speeches, he has a little extra oomph, a little extra perk in his step. He really sort of sees himself as this bulwark for democracy. But the other main person in this is Mike Donilon, who has been with him since 1981. They basically have this mind meld. And Mike Donilon has argued that basically January 6th is equivalent to what 9/11 was during the 2004 election, which he also worked on. And he basically feels that the dominant images in people's minds when they go to vote in November is going to be January 6th. But
so like 9/11, he's saying that it's not like 9/11. This guy, let me show you who this guy is, Mike Donilon. He has been advising, again, the guy just said, been advising Joe Biden since 1991. And he's advised tons of other Democrats. He worked at, like the gentleman just said, worked on the John Kerry campaign in 2004. And just like 9/11 was used to play on people's emotions in the 2004 election, he thinks that January 6th is going to have that same pull, that same appeal. So this guy, who is one of Biden's biggest advisors, is advising him to play up political violence, play up January 6th, because that's the way to appeal to the electorate. The only problem is that there's people within the Biden campaign that says, look, we've been playing this up and talking about this for 2 years, and the polls are not moving. And there's no movement on this, and the people don't care. And this is a losing strategy. So who's this guy, Mike Donilon? Where did he go to school? Jesuit, Georgetown. I thought this was really interesting. Check out who his brother is. Donilon's brothers, plural. Donilon's brothers are BlackRock Investment Institute Chair. Tom Donilon. So I don't know why it's plural. So this is his brother. It is the chair of BlackRock. The chair of BlackRock is who went to Jesuit Georgetown. He is Joe Biden's closest advisor and has been advising him since the 1990s. He's the one who's advising Biden to play up the threats to democracy, play up the January 6th, play up the political violence, because that's the way you get the electorate emotional, and that's the way you get out the vote. Only problem is it's not working. Listen again.
New reporting, some influential top Democrats warn that this is a losing strategy.
It's a losing strategy.
Cover national politics, including Alex Thompson of Axios, as well as CNN's Eva McCann. So explain this. I mean, as they say, the call's coming from inside the House. Who in Biden world is driving the strategy and who's dissenting?
So the main people that are driving that strategy are the president himself. You've seen whenever he gives democracy speeches, he has a little extra oomph, a little extra perk in his step. He really sort of sees himself as this bulwark for democracy. But the other main person in this is Mike Donilon, who has been with him since 1981. They basically have this mind meld. And Mike Donilon has argued that basically January 6th is equivalent to what 9/11 was during the 2004 election, which he also worked on. And he basically feels that the dominant images in people's minds when they go to vote in November is going to be January 6th. But increasingly, especially as the Biden campaign has been spending a ton of money, has been ranking up their staff, and the poll numbers have gone nowhere, there's increasing skepticism that this is the strategy that will work, and including among Biden people themselves. But there's sort of a culture within the Biden world,
listen to this part,
insular, that makes some people scared to bring it up.
Listen. I think that part is so significant because everybody keeps saying they're going to remove Biden. And I'm telling you, they're not going to remove Biden. Let's look at Littman's 13 keys again. Party mandate, that's check. You only need 6. If Biden doesn't run, if they change, get Biden out of there, then the incumbency key is gone. That's 2. Short-term economy, people. Listen, so I think you can click third party too, because Kennedy's not on the ballot in every state, but he's on the ballot in Michigan, and he's polling 15% in Michigan. How could you not click third party? So if you click incumbency and you replace Joe Biden with somebody else, that's 3 right there: party mandate, incumbency, and then third party. So short-term economy. So I don't even want to talk about that yet because I want to do a whole podcast about this, because short-term economy, on paper, that looks good, but the people aren't feeling that. Social unrest, we'll talk a little bit more about that in this podcast, and then also the next podcast. Foreign policy failure. I already told you, foreign policy failure. Afghanistan, that's click. So I got 1, 2, 3. If there's not an incumbency, that's 4. He's not charismatic at all. That's 5. You only need one more. The border is a scandal. I already told you. The border is a scandal. So I'm telling you, I don't think they're going to replace Joe Biden. And everyone's saying that, even with all the cheap fake videos and everything, that they're not going to replace Biden, because Biden has powerful people in his campaign, powerful people like BlackRock. BlackRock power is what Joe Biden has behind him. BlackRock power. That's who he has behind him. So they're not going to get rid of this guy. And even though this is what this guy says, this Axios reporter, is that even though people within Joe Biden's campaign understand that this January 6th threat to democracy, political violence stuff is a loser, they're afraid to bring it up. This is what he says. Take a listen.
There's increasing skepticism that this is the strategy that will work, and including among Biden people themselves. But there's sort of a culture within the Biden world that's very insular, that makes some people scared to bring it up.
Scared to bring it up. That's the emperor's new clothes. We talked about it in the last podcast. That even though a lot of people recognize that the emperor was naked, they didn't want to be seen as fools. They were afraid to say that he was naked until a child said that he was naked. Took a child to say it first, and then everybody else, oh, he's naked. So this political violence stuff is not working, but that is the debate that Joe Biden wants to have about January 6th and all this nonsense. I want you to take a look at this clip. This is what's this woman's name? God, I can't remember her name. Anna from The View. Take a listen to what she says. This is the bar that Joe Biden has to climb on Wednesday in the debate.
So that if Joe Biden shows up and doesn't keel over on his way to the podium, he's had a good night.
So he just has to not kill over. And then he's had a good night, is what Anna says. So January 6th was absolutely I like to call it a Reichstag fire. And the reason I've called it the Reichstag fire from the beginning, because if you know the story of the Reichstag fire, is that after the Nazis were elected and Hitler was elected chancellor, democratically elected, then the Nazis, they set the fire at the Reichstag. The Reichstag was essentially the German capital. They set the fire, they blamed the communists, and then they use the propaganda and the anger and the emotions of the German people after the Reichstag was burned to seize more power, is what they did. And just like this guy is telling Biden, you got to play up the January 6th stuff. That's what the Nazis did after the Reichstag fire. They played up the Reichstag fire and demonized the communists and said that the communists started it when they were the ones who actually started. And then they got the Reichstag from that point to pass the annulment. What is it called? The what is it? I forget what it's called. But Annulment Act. I think that's what it is. Anyway, this was the act that took Hitler from chancellor and made him Führer. So the Reichstag, after setting the Reichstag fire, they used the Reichstag fire to seize more power and to make Hitler Führer at that point, and then the rest is history. So the January 6th was set by the Democrats. This fence that you're seeing right here, this fence was put up after the riot, on the 6th. They didn't put the fence with the barbed wire up before. They didn't do this before. They put it up after January 6th. Why didn't they put it up before? Because they were setting the fire. This was the barrier that they had up on January 6th. These little bicycle racks, easily moved, you can easily storm over these racks. So this is what they put up before January 6th. And then this is what they put up after January 6th. And they kept this fencing up for 6 months afterwards. Look at this article. Came out in Time. The budget for Capitol Police in 2020 was $500 million almost. $480 million is what Capitol Police's budget was in 2020. Take a look at this article. Capitol Police, this is New York Times. Capitol Police told to hold back on riot response on January 6th, report finds. Despite being tipped that Congress itself on January 6th, that Congress itself was the target on January 6th, Capitol Police were ordered not to use their most powerful crowd control weapons, according to scathing new watchdog report. So they were ordered, even though they had a budget of almost $500 million, they were ordered not to use the tools. So not only were they not putting up, fencing that would have, kept the rioters away from the Capitol, they were telling the Capitol Police not to use their most sophisticated tools for crowd control. This is all stand down. You remember if you haven't heard about this, but this video from Nancy Pelosi's daughter, who's a filmmaker. She was filming there on January 6th and filming for some documentary that she made on HBO. And she was filming the whole thing. And this video of Nancy Pelosi just came out. I want you to listen to what Nancy Pelosi says in the back of this car.
We have responsibility, Terry. We did not have any accountability for what was going on there, and we should have. This is ridiculous. You're going to ask me in the middle of the thing when they've already breached the inaugural stuff that should we call the Capitol Police?
So this is
National Guard.
So this is an act because this woman fully knows what's going on. She knows her daughter's there with the camera. So everything going on here is an act. But she says something interesting here. Let's listen to this part.
We call the Capitol Police, the National Guard. Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with?
Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with? That's a great question, Nancy Pelosi. And the reason that the National Guard were not there to begin with, this is General Walker. And General Walker is the general of the D.C. National Guard. And General Walker tells you, Nancy Pelosi, why the National Guard was not there to begin with. Take a listen.
I talked to Chief Son on Sunday.
So Chief Son, who he's talking about, is the chief of Capitol Police. So if anyone was going to request the National Guard, it would have been the chief of Capitol Police. All right? So let's listen to General Walker here.
I talked to Chief Son on Sunday. I talked to him Saturday and Sunday. We talk. We're friends. Mm-hmm. I've known him for a long time. So on Sunday, I asked him, are you going to request D.C. National Guard help? And if you do, I need it in writing. It has to be formal because the Secretary of Defense has to approve it. He told me he was not allowed to request the support. And I asked him if he wanted me to share that. And he said, no, I can't even ask you for the support, is what he told me.
So why can't the chief of Capitol Police request support from the National Guard? Nancy Pelosi's here saying, why wasn't the National Guard there to begin with?
Why weren't the National Guard there to begin with?
Because the chief of Capitol Police says that he's not allowed to request the National Guard, is why the National Guard wasn't there.
In writing, it has to be formal because the Secretary of Defense has to approve it. He told me he was not allowed to request the support.
So that's why. That's why, Nancy. Because the chief of Capitol Police was not allowed. Now, I've explained all this before. Ultimately, and I've played the clips of the Senate hearings where all the members of the Capitol Police Board testified. The Senate Sergeant at Arms, who's passed away now, the House Sergeant at Arms, the Chief of Capitol Police, the architect of the Capitol is also a member of the board, but he didn't testify in those Senate hearings. But anyway, so they tell you exactly why Chief Son was not allowed, and Chief Son was not allowed because they said that there wasn't intelligence. They didn't know that there was going to be violence. That's what they said. They didn't know that there was going to be any violence, and so that's why they didn't request the guard, is because they didn't have the intelligence. But I've played this clip before. Very interesting that this is AOC, Congresswoman from New York. She had intelligence. She had better intelligence than the House Sergeant at Arms, than the Chief of Capitol Police. I don't know what the intelligence the Chief of Capitol Police had because he said he wasn't allowed to request the National Guard. But the House Sergeant at Arms, the House Sergeant at Arms answers directly to the Speaker of the House. That's who he answers to. He's the one who said that they didn't have the intelligence. So AOC had better intelligence than all of them. And I want you to listen to what AOC had. Now, she explains it here. Take a listen.
1 week before, the week prior to the insurrection, I started to get text messages that I needed to be careful. And that in particular, I needed to be careful about the 6th. For the timeline for you to know, this Congress got sworn in that Sunday, and the insurrection happened, Sunday. Then the insurrection happened Wednesday. So there was.
So the riot happened on a Wednesday. The new Congress was sworn in on Sunday. Chief Walker says that on that Sunday before the riot, that's when he spoke to the Chief of Capitol Police, telling him that I'm not allowed to request the National Guard. So she's explaining the timeline that Wednesday was the January 6th. On that Sunday, they were sworn in. Also on that Sunday, Chief Walker is speaking with General Walker speaking with Chief Son, and he's telling him not allowed to request the National Guard. Take a listen to this. On on Thursday before the Sunday, 3 days before, this woman's getting text messages that there's going to be violence, that she needs to have a plan for her safety. And not only is she getting text messages, she's getting text messages from other members of Congress, people. Other members of Congress are texting her that there's going to be violence. But the Capitol Police Board, they don't know that there's going to be violence.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I probably started getting text messages about having plans for my safety, or me trying to figure something out about Thursday. And those text messages came from other members of Congress. They were not threats, but they were other members saying that they knew, and that they were hearing even from Trump people and Republicans, that they knew in their life that there was violence expected on Wednesday.
So there was violence expected on Wednesday. She knew, everybody knew. The Capitol Police Board, particularly the House Sergeant at Arms, said that they didn't have the intelligence. This General Walker said the Chief's son told him, I'm not allowed to request the National Guard. So let me get this straight. So the Chief of Capitol Police is not allowed to request the National Guard. They are telling the Capitol Police not to use weapons that we furnished them with to the tune of $500 million. They're not putting up the security fence that would keep protesters away from the Capitol. All of this is going on. Do you understand why I call this the Reichstag fire, people? And now Biden is trying to play it up. This is what Joe Biden wants to have a debate about. He wants to have a debate about January 6th. He wants to have a debate about political violence and how violent the Republicans are. We're probably not going to get into it in this podcast, but we're going to look at, who's more violent? Who was more violent in 2020 alone? Let's not even look at all political violence. Who committed more violence in the year of political violence? Who committed more political violence in the year of 2020 alone? Democrats or Republicans? We don't even have to go beyond any other year, but just look at 2020. But I'm going to show you how they committed a lot more violence than just the violence from 2020. You remember the Trump rallies in 2016. Everywhere Trump went, that there was violence at his rallies. His demonstrators getting beat up when they're leaving the rally, and the Democrats encouraging that the entire time. I have clips. I will show you. The FBI director, I don't know if you guys remember this guy, Director Wray, around this time leading up to January 6th and definitely after January 6th, he continued to say that the biggest national security threat in the United States is white supremacy. All these white supremacists that are a threat to national security. I don't know if you guys remember that, and I'm going to tell you what that's about and how that plays into Biden's campaign strategy.
Between the years 2000 and 2016, the white supremacists were responsible for more homicides than any other domestic extremism movement. Now, I see the distinction you're making, homegrown versus domestic. But let me ask you, can you quantify either one of them for us?
Well, in terms of number of arrests, we have, through the third quarter of this fiscal year, had about, give or take, 100 arrests in the international terrorism side, which includes the homegrown violent extremism. This year. But we've also had just about the same number, again, don't quote me to the exact digit, on the domestic terrorism side. And I will say that a majority of the domestic terrorism cases that we've investigated are motivated by some version of what you might call white supremacist violence, but it includes other things as well.
So that's 100 arrests. So he says that there's 100 arrests, and the majority of those 100 domestic arrests are motivated by white supremacy. He went on to say that white supremacy was the biggest domestic terrorism threat. And then you remember Joe Biden and then the media, quoting him. They went all around telling us that the biggest domestic terrorism threat, the biggest threat to our national security is this white supremacy. Take a listen. This is him again.
How would you describe the danger to public safety that is posed by white supremacist extremism?
The danger, I think, of white supremacist violent extremism or any other kind of violent extremism is, of course, significant. We assess significant, persistent, pervasive threat. We tackle it both through our joint.
So where's all this white supremacy threat? Where do we see all of this threats of white supremacy going on? Really, I'm serious. I mean, this has been 5 years since he has been giving this testimony. Where's all this white supremacy threat and violence that we see going on? And
racially motivated violent extremism, specifically of the sort that advocates for the superiority of the white race, is a persistent, evolving threat.
So what this is about is because the January 6th thing and the January 6th attack on the Capitol, insurrection, is that they want to paint this as black versus white again, that all of these people that went to the Capitol, that they called the Capitol police officer the N-word, and they were all racist white supremacists that are trying to steal the vote away from the black people, because the black voters are the ones who elected Joe Biden, and they were there on January 6th to steal the black people's vote. And they were motivated by race. So all this rhetoric about white supremacy and white supremacy being the biggest threat started to come out around the same time as January 6th, before and after. We still don't even know how many federal agents, how many FBI agents he had there on January 6th. But anyway, he's pitching the whole white supremacy because they wanted to paint this as a white versus black issue. That's part of the entire game, is to divide us, white and black, so we're fighting against each other and not focus on what these globalists are doing. But there are tons of black people there on January 6th. The narrative is absolutely it's wrong. It's inaccurate. People there were not motivated by racism at all. And you're going to see that white supremacy is not our biggest threat at all. I'm going to show you what our biggest threat is. But this is a black gentleman from Florida who was there on January 6th. Take a listen to him.
Number one, I'm defending the American dream. I have a small business, so that's what I'm supporting. I'm trying to keep that alive, and this is great what's going on. This is my third time here at a rally, and it's more like a festival. I mean, you see one thing on the news, but being here shows a completely different thing. It shows that the people have the real power. So
it's more like a festival, is what this guy says. I mean, he's not being called the N-word like the Capitol Police officer who claimed that he was called the N-word and lied. Harry Dunn, it's all made up. It was all a lie. And now they're trying to play that up. They want to play that up in this election. This is the debate that Joe Biden wants to have. He wants to have the debate about Trump being a racist and white supremacy and January 6th and tying that all together and dictator and all this stuff. They set the fire. They set the fire. But white supremacy is not our big threat, people. This is the big threat right here, our open borders. This is a 12-year-old girl who they just arrested her killers. She was suffocated. Illegal migrants killed this 12-year-old Texas girl. We just learned about that this week. Migrant charged with murder of 12-year-old, what's her name? Joycelyn. Was released into the U.S. just weeks ago. This isn't white supremacy. White supremacy didn't do this. This is another one. Arrested just this week. Illegal immigrant suspected in Rachel Marin's murder went on months-long terrorist spree. It was illegal. Killed a mother from Maryland. This guy. Not white supremacy, Director Ray. Not white supremacy at all. Here's another one. It's a legal immigrant. Just arrested this week. All this happened this week. Arrested this week. Ecuadorian migrant who allegedly raped 13-year-old girl, tied her up and raped her with a machete and held a machete to her while he raped her and led her into a park in New York and raped a 13-year-old girl. This is the threat. This isn't white supremacy, people. This isn't white supremacy at all. And there's even a bigger threat that's not white supremacy that is being caused by our open borders. Take a listen.
Back home now to the terror arrests across the country. We've learned several men with suspected ties to ISIS living in the U.S. have been taken into custody. Julia Ainsley is with us with more. Julia, what happened?
Lester, the 8 suspects are men from Tajikistan who were all arrested by ICE over the weekend in Philadelphia, Los Angeles, and New York. Sources familiar with the matter tell us the men crossed the southern border, some over a year ago, and that border agents found no evidence of terror ties at the time. A recent FBI probe then uncovered the 8 men may have ties to ISIS, similar to a case we first reported here at NBC News last month.
And so these are the 8 that they arrested. How many have come across that they haven't arrested? How many cells are laying dormant? This isn't white supremacy, people. This isn't white supremacy. So listen to what Director Ray is saying now. Since October 7th, he's not talking about white supremacy anymore. Take a listen to this clip.
October, FBI Director Christopher Wray has appeared before Congress 8 times. On every occasion, he raised alarms over the ongoing threats facing the United States. He did so again earlier this month.
We've seen the threat from foreign terrorists rise to a whole nother level.
Well, maybe you guys
after October 7th.
Yeah, maybe you guys were focused too much on white supremacy, the non-existing threat, that nobody's being threatened by white supremacy, and you guys are spending too much time focused on that when terrorists were coming across the border. What about that, Ray?
We continue to see the cartels push fentanyl and other dangerous drugs. China continues its relentless efforts to steal our intellectual property and most valuable information. And that's just scratching the surface.
My next guest underscores Ray's concerns in a piece for Foreign Affairs. Quote, in the piece, he says the United States faces a serious threat of a terrorist attack in the months ahead. Former CIA acting director and CBS News senior national security contributor Michael Morrell joins me now.
So Michael Morrell was deputy director to Brennan. He was also one of the agents that delivered the August 6 bin Laden determined to attack in the United States. He delivered that memo to Bush at his Crawford Ranch. So just that's who Mike Morrell is.
Mike, thanks a lot for being with us. Let's just give me your assessment of the whole threat landscape right now.
When you dissect John, Director Ray's comments over those 8 testimonies, what you see is that the threat falls into 3 categories. The first category are lone wolves already here in the United States, right? American citizens who foreign terrorists might be able to radicalize and to encourage, just through their social media.
Love those lone wolves, because if you know anything about the FBI, it's usually the FBI behind the lone wolves, making contact with them, setting up the whole thing. Those lone wolves. That's what you got to be. You got to be very suspicious of the lone wolves, people. But that's not white supremacy. He's talking about some Islamic influenced foreign terrorist influence in a Islamic radical. He's not talking about white supremacy here.
Category are lone wolves already here in the United States, right? American citizens who foreign terrorists.
They don't even have to be American citizens, bro. Anybody's coming across the border right now.
Be able to radicalize and to encourage, just through their social media, posts and the like, videos where they can radicalize somebody and encourage a lone wolf attack. That's one category. The second category are actually foreign terrorist organizations like ISIS-K, which is the ISIS group in Afghanistan, actually sending operatives to the United States to conduct an attack here the way Al-Qaeda did on 9/11. That's the second category. And then the third category that Director Ray has talked about are nation states, in particular Iran, who have tried to send people here to assassinate a former Trump administration official to get even, right, with our assassination.
I'm sure Iran's got people here. I'm sure China's got people here. I mean, the border's wide open. And you guys were focused on white supremacy and telling us the white supremacy was the threat. And now you got ISIS cells in the United States. You think Joe Biden wants to have this debate? You think this is the policy that Joe Biden wants to have? No, he doesn't want to have that policy debate. We'll get into this in the next podcast. And we're going to talk about January 6th a little bit more in the next podcast. We're going to talk about political violence in the next podcast, all the political violence in 2020. Not just January 6th. We're going to talk about all the political violence in January 20, because there was a lot of political violence. But the last clip that I want to play, I have two clips that I want to play. I want to play this clip, first of all, because everyone is saying, well, Donald Trump's going to pardon, January 6 people that have been arrested for January 6th. And Donald Trump has said that he's going to pardon those people, and he should. I 100% support him pardoning the vast majority of people who have been convicted and are political prisoners because they trespassed on the Capitol, when all they had to do, if they didn't want people to trespass on the Capitol lawn, they could have just put up this fence. And most of those law-abiding people would not have penetrated the fence. So they kept. Actually, people like Ray Epps are the ones who broke down these little bicycle barriers. And then when people came from the ellipse, not even knowing that they weren't supposed to be on the Capitol lawn, went in the Capitol and opened doors and things like that. Nothing but trespassing. Those people definitely should be pardoned. But Trump's already said he's not going to pardon everybody. He's not going to pardon people that beat up police and broke windows. He's made that statement many times. This is one of them. I just want to play it because I think this is going to be a question in the debate. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the moderators too before we go. But take a listen to this clip.
My question to you is, will you pardon the January 6th rioters who were convicted of federal offenses?
I am inclined to pardon many of them. I can't say for every single one, because a couple of them probably they got out of control. But, when you look at Antifa, what they've done to Portland, and if you look at Antifa, look at what they've done to Minneapolis and so many other places.
He's
look
right.
At what they did to Seattle and BLM.
Absolutely.
Many people were killed. These people, I'm not trying to justify anything, but you have two standards of justice in this
Absolutely.
country. And what they've done, and I love that question, because what they've done to so many people is nothing. And then what they've done to these people, they've persecuted these people.
Them.
And yeah, my answer is I am most likely, if I get in, I would say it will be a large portion of them.
Absolutely. That's great. I love it. And this guy's going to kill. Listen to that. He's going to kill Biden. He's going to murder Biden on Wednesday. Murder him. But the moderators, again, they're the ones. They're like the referees. They're the ones who can steer the debate. And you watch for this, how they can steer the debate into policy questions where Joe Biden is weak. He's weak on policy. Or watch and see how Jake Tapper and Dana Bash steer the debate into a debate about January 6th and about political violence. And if Trump is going to pardon January 6th protesters and racism and dictator and all of that stuff. And the moderators have the power to steer the debate. And if they do that, they're rigging the election, because it should be a policy debate. A policy debate is what we deserve as the electorate. That's what we want. I want to hear about policy. I don't want to hear about how Trump is a racist or he wants to be a dictator or January. I'm not interested in that debate. So the moderators have a lot of power. All right, so I'm almost done. This is the last clip that I want to play. This is Nancy Pelosi's daughter, who she was the one who filmed the movie, who was in the car with the camera rolling when Nancy Pelosi says, "Why wasn't the National Guard there?" So this is Nancy Pelosi's daughter. She's being recorded. It looks, because of the angle of this recording, that she doesn't know that she's being recorded. But you got to listen to what Nancy Pelosi's daughter says here. Take a listen.
Well, I think the one thing, if you drag it out, after the Democrats lose the House, and then they get rid of the committee, people may lose interest. The first trials are going to get a lot of attention. It's like
she's talking about January 6th. That once the Democrats are out of power and the committee is the January 6th committee is dissolved, and the Democrats in Congress are not able to hammer this narrative over and over again, that people are going to lose interest. And that's what this Axios reporter is saying about Joe Biden's campaign and how this issue of focusing on January 6th and threats to democracy and all that stuff, people have pocketbook issues that they're worried about. They're not worried about this stuff. It's a losing issue. And that is what Nancy Pelosi's own daughter is saying here, that people are going to lose interest once the Democrats are out of power.
Well, I think the one thing, if you drag it out, after the Democrats lose the House, and then they get rid of the committee, people may lose interest. The first trials are going to get a lot of attention. It's like anniversaries. The first one is a big deal. They did a really big deal. January 6th. No one's going to care after the Democrats are out of power. And then take Biden out of office, then who cares? If you drag it out long enough, I wouldn't go first for a trial, because D.C. is a lot of people that work for the government, and it's a lot of, I don't think I'm sympathetic.
The jury is going to be, we don't think the trial should be held there.
Well, if you got moved, you totally
So, essentially, she's saying that people are going to lose interest, and that's what's happening. That's what's happening, that people are not feeling the emotional pull of January 6th and political violence. And there's a reason why. And that's what I didn't get to in this podcast. Why is this strategy not working? And we'll talk about that on Monday. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and I will see you on Monday.